So you have a memo that was sent in the Friday packet, and then Lisa, I think you passed on a hard copy of the second page, which is a chart. There was a couple of errors and typos that we wanted to correct.
So this replaces what was on the memo?
Correct.
All right. Done.
So what this is the annual October 1 enrollment report. On October 1, we report our student enrollment information to the State Department of Education, and so therefore on the following meeting we report that to the Board of Education as well. And our enrollment is on this chart, and in the memo is for 4 years, so 15-16, 16-17, 17-18, and this current year. Exactly how we're doing on the enrollment update. If you could turn to the actual chart, I think it's really important for everybody to take a look down the chart, and it goes left to right, starting with center school at the top, and then finishing with the number of students who are currently outplaced after the high school. And as you can see, just year to year, looking at 17 to 18, there are some classes where we're down 7 or 20 students, and in others where we're up similar. 39 students were up in 7th grade, for example, compared to the year before. And again, those are bubble classes that are traveling through. The big takeaway here is that there's been a lot of talk over the years that enrollment was on a steep decline, and really we're not seeing that as the case. We're actually up 12 total students across the district. If you look at our students who are outplaced, that number is up by 8. Which matches where we were toward the middle and end of last year and all the conversation we had about our special education budget. And you'll also notice at the very bottom of the page there are 3 particular subgroups that we pay attention to: special education, English language learners, and free and reduced lunch. And I will in a minute be inviting both Ken and Christine to talk a little bit more in detail about 2 of the categories. But in special education, the students who we in total were up as of October 1 compared to last October 1, 20 students identified as needing special services. In English, our English language learner enrollment is up by 15. That is 15 more students who have moved in who are identified with English language learning. And then in free and reduced lunch, you'll see a significant increase, and there's an explanation, a very straightforward explanation to that Ken could speak to around free and reduced lunch, which is the qualification that's been changed by the state. We were at 278 students last year, and that number for free and reduced is 496 students this year, which is up 218 students, which is, whoa, that's a doubling of where we were. Ken, can you explain how students qualify and families qualify for that?
Sure. There's 3 different ways. One is direct certification from the state, where they tell us that a family qualifies. Another way is that a family would fill out an application that we get from the U.S. Department of Agriculture that has set income limits for families depending on the number of folks in the household and what their income is, and they can qualify that way. And then in the spring of last year, the State Department of Education declared every child who had somebody in the household Medicaid eligible was now eligible for free or reduced lunch, regardless of income requirements, and that caused the huge increase in those children eligible.
While Ken has the floor, was there any questions on that, just to check with that?
Are you aware if we're seeing a bigger increase than other districts on this, or is this everybody seeing the same thing?
I think districts similar to ours are seeing similar rise.
Okay.
And it has led to increased participation in the lunch program also. So sales are up.
That's a good thing.
But then, speaking just as an example, I'd like Ken to explain what happens. So we have this increase, which is based on state change in requirements, and so we have therefore more participation in our food program. So then, Ken, share what happened when we talk about red tape and bureaucracy and what we have to deal with.
We potentially get into a position where we have a separate lunch fund bank account for this, and all the revenues go in there and expenses are paid out of it. And we have a healthy balance in that account right now. And due in large part to this increased participation, we may end up with what the state would declare too much money in the bank account. We're supposed to have up to 3 months cost in the bank account, and we're currently a little bit over that. So we actually have to report to the state what our strategy will be to correct that. And I think that was done. We had a healthy balance before, but in large part from this move, increased our participation, so increased our revenue.
So
And created this situation.
It's just important for the board and the public to know that the state makes us follow a new requirement, we follow it, which has an unintended consequence that then they ask us for corrective action on later. That was caused by the state's original decision. So this is the constant process that we're going through all the time. Frankly, it gets tiring. But having said that, I'd like to invite Dr. Sipala up if there's no other questions regarding the free and reduced lunch increase to the special education enrollment increase. Dr. Sipala could explain a little bit about that.
Well, Dr. Sipala's coming up.
Sure.
And a general question about these, are they pretty much in line with what we built our budget on, or were there any grades that had significant differences from how we were budgeted?
Great question, Bob. And I should have said that we're a little above Malone and McBroom's forecast, but we're pretty much right with our forecast because we were
we had built
rolling
the
grades
budget
up,
on.
and we really landed pretty square on kindergarten as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as a follow-up, Dr. Ruby with the principals are doing their class size analysis, and they'll be reporting on that at our November 7th meeting as
Perfect,
well.
that was my next
Okay.
question.
Yep.
Okay.
I think this is about right where we projected it during our budget presentation last
Yes.
time.
Yep.
Could we get a copy of the corrected enrollment report sent to us? Or is it,
I
because,
think we gave that.
no, in our
electronically.
board, our electronic
electronically?
copy.
Of course.
Yes, because our board packet has the one that
Has
has
the
been
statement.
corrected since then, right? So if that
Mhm.
could be sent, that'd be great,
Sure.
thanks.
Yeah, we'll use that.
Definitely.
All right, Dr.
So
Sipala?
I want to share a little more info and then answer any questions you have regarding our special education population. So our current population is just over 14%, I think 14.2 precisely. That's a little bit of an increase from last year. We have 20 additional students in our total count over last year. It is really in line with a statewide trend. So the state average percentage of students in special education statewide has also increased. We are still below the state average of 14.5%, but that is a trend statewide that more students are being identified with disabilities and in need of specialized services. We also have a larger preschool program than last year. So last year on October 1st, we had 6 fewer preschoolers than we had this year on October 1st. So we have an ever-growing preschool program. We also have a number of students. There are about 20 students in Brookfield who currently receive birth to 3 services. We've received 7 referrals so far. That brings us to about January. So we do anticipate our preschool to continue to grow throughout the year as children turn 3. We're already starting this year with a much larger preschool program than we did last year. So that is part of the reason. I also want to share that our staff has been working really hard to identify student learning needs and social emotional needs. And that has been demonstrated in a couple ways. One, we're actually working on our SRBI, which is our scientifically research-based intervention programs. That's not special ed, but it is very much connected to this. We are trying to identify academic concerns and social emotional behavioral concerns and address those. To give you some insight into what that looks like for special education, last year between October 2nd of 2017 and June 30th of 2018, so basically after the count that we shared with you for the October 1st numbers, we actually had 105 referrals for special education and evaluations for initial evals, first time students had been referred. 50 of those students qualified. So we're doing a lot of evaluations to determine and to make sure we understand student needs, and then we're really working hard to address those needs. So that's part of the story for why there are more special education students. I think it does reflect, and I really want to stress, I think it reflects what's happening in other communities as well. Are there any questions about?
Was-
Out of district numbers? How are the out of district numbers within the total? But
Within
that was
the
such a
total?
focus last year.
Well, I think it is listed there. I don't have that chart quite in front of me. But we are
The same
where
as the end of
I,
spring.
we are where I expected us to be.
Okay.
We are very close to where I expected us to be. Those numbers change sometimes daily, so someone comes in and someone comes back at the same time. But we are in the range where, you know, we sort of anticipated. An important thing about that number is these are students who attend school outside of Brookfield. So some of them, in that 31, it doesn't mean they're all attending private special education programs. Some of them are attending magnet programs or other regional programs, but they have IEPs, and we're responsible for them, and that's why they're captured in that number.
Mhm.
So it is right now in line with what we expected.
Okay, thank you.
And did you see the growth in any particular building, or was it more in special ed, or was it more spread across the district?
So we don't have the breakdown of buildings in front of me. Where we see this bubble is really our preschool age students. Our
Okay.
preschool is really at maximum capacity now. We have a lot of plans for how we're going to make sure that all of the services are provided, but to have 6 additional preschoolers from last year is a big deal.
How many preschool classrooms are there?
We have one preschool classroom. So we have a special education teacher. We also have a regular education teacher who co-teaches and provides a lot of literacy instruction. Preschool students do not all attend, you know, they attend either in the morning or the afternoon. They don't all attend 5 days. It's really individualized based on the student's needs. So our overall capacity in pre-K, if you look here, we have 44 current students in preschool. That doesn't mean there are 44 students in that room at once, but we have one
Thank
preschool
goodness.
room. And students do have schedules. We do not have more than 20 students there at a time.
And that 44 represents the typical as well as the special ed students, or just the special ed students? Typical students, too. Yeah. Thank you.
So we're really we're at, as you said, we're at the max with preschool. So that does affect, there's a lottery, right, for after, so that would obviously affect.
Well, and
In terms of typical
Sorry.
peers. Yeah, so typical peers actually, we really need to balance that. So generally, if I say that there are 20 students in a classroom, we need that to be 10 typical peers and 10 students with disabilities typically. So that number's a little bit more. We know who our typical peers are. Those students have entered. There is a waiting list. Maybe students might leave in the middle of the year, and we may have openings. It's the students with disabilities that we will be adding throughout the year because we are required to provide them with a free and appropriate education when they turn 3. So a student may turn 3 next week. They may turn 3 the first week in June, and they're both entitled to start preschool and receive those services when they turn 3.
Okay.
So that is, we expect the increase in students with IEPs throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Alright.
So if we're looking at almost to capacity now, we probably, Dr. Bo, might be seeing a new pre-K teacher in next year's
That's a
budget.
prelude to the
That's it.
next memo presentation, which we'll be
prediction.
talking about the
Okay.
budget and a
Good
proposal
segue.
that will be forthcoming.
Okay,
It's a prelude and it's coming.
Okay,
It's not a prelude anymore. We will be
Yeah.
asking for another personal teacher.
Looking ahead, will there be a classroom design, I mean, will
Well,
there be
we
specific
have a
classroom?
second
or will
classroom we're
we-
utilizing right now. Maybe
Yeah.
Christine,
I do.
talk to
So
that
I
a
want to
little
be
bit.
clear, and I want to make sure,
Yeah.
parents who are watching this understand.
The Center
as
School
well.
does have a little bit of room
We are
there,
fully prepared to provide all of the services that our preschoolers who are going to be coming into Center School need this year. One of the things that we did with the help of Mrs. Diamond is knowing that our numbers have been increasing from year to year, and knowing that we expected to have a large preschool program, we actually moved one of the kindergarten classrooms from right next to the preschool to another, to just adjacent to other kindergarten classrooms, but in a different space. So we freed that space that's right next to the preschool, and we are utilizing that space now to provide some individual and small group instruction to preschool students. Our staff is working in that space right now. So we were already sort of thinking that through because we do want to make sure that our 2 preschools are, if we have 2 preschools, if we ever need that, are going to be in the same area, and we're utilizing that space now for preschool instruction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Sipala.
Do you,
Oh.
so are 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in the same classroom in that one?
So it depends. So we do generally have our 3-year-olds attending in the morning and our 4-year-olds attending in the afternoon, but it's more a general guideline and not a rule. We do individualize, and we have to make sure if we put all of our 3-year-olds in the morning, sometimes we wouldn't have enough service providers in the morning. So we actually do have some 3-year-olds coming in the afternoon and vice versa, but the general rule of thumb is 3-year-olds in the morning, 4-year-olds in the afternoon. And then we individualize based on student need and also based on our capacity, our service provider schedules.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
It's interesting, I was looking not only from class to class comparison from one year to the next, but also as the class matriculates. So last year's first graders to this year's second graders. And it seems like it seems like last year's first, second, and fifth grade is where we're getting the largest jumps in that. And obviously, if it's new with that, it may be those moving into the community if we're looking at ones from this year prior. Are there any grades that, because of the increase, and I know a lot of this increase we captured in springtime when we did an enrollment report in springtime, but are there any grades that are borderline as far as in grade capacity, classroom capacity?
We're going to really cover that in depth next meeting. Ken has some preliminary numbers just in terms
Okay.
of enrollment. Was there anything, Ken, in particular you wanted to share? I know 4th and 2nd we were talking about.
Right.
In terms of sections.
One grade will go up a section, one will go down a section, but
Yeah.
otherwise there won't be any change.
Okay.
But we
Oh,
don't.
so that's
yeah,
next month.
All right, next month. But we don't anticipate right now, based on these numbers, looking at increases in the regular education classroom teachers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Brill in regards to the report? Okay, moving along, we have the preliminary budget discussion and goals.
Okay, so you have Lisa, did you pass out just this? Okay, so
there's
everything's
more
there.
to copy
Um,
that as well.
Different than what was in the
This-
packet?
Yes.
There was a change to, under operations and facilities, Bob, so those of you on the finance committee, sure, get rid of the old one. What we talked about yesterday, so there was a change from Friday. There's 6 goals now under operations and facilities rather than 5. So I added a piece there for us to have a conversation about this evening. So in preparing annually, what we've done is at this particular meeting in October, our second meeting in October, to prepare and really provide some guidance for myself and the team going into budget development. So we'd have a proposal for the first meeting in December, is to transparently talk about assumptions going forward in the budget, things that we believe in. There's not much change on this first page from last year, but I'd like to just walk through some of the budget assumptions. Underneath the first bold bullet there is to support the strategic coherence plan. The board recognizes its responsibility to develop the 2019-2020 operating budget, and that budget would provide sufficient and appropriate resources, promote continuous improvement, afford us sufficient flexibility to respond to changing needs and contingencies, provide for necessary maintenance and improvement of our school facilities, and it represents value in the eyes of the community. And it's important that the board's operating budget do the following: maintain our commitment to ensuring appropriate district and school organizational structures that support intentional implementation of our strategic plan, maintains and continues to enhance established program improvements while remaining responsive to changing needs. That goes right hand in hand with enrollment and other needs that we see that come up. Continues to attract and retain highly competent faculty and staff within a culture that fosters professional learning. Seeks to maintain board-approved practices concerning class size while adjusting staffing patterns to reflect any changes in enrollment. We just talked about that with pre-K. provides the necessary resources to address social and emotional needs. That is a big push this year. It's an actual professional goal of mine, but also a goal of the district, and especially K through 8, but along with the work at the high school that's going through. Provides for rigorous, relevant curriculum using best practices in instruction, assessment, and digital learning. All the curriculum design work, you hear about that quite often, all the work with CAPE and our teachers. It's just amazing what's going on. Providing technology infrastructure and professional learning that effectively supports student success in our digital learning environment. We have Eric here often and our big budget investment and all the things we're doing with technology. I just complained a little bit about bureaucracy, meeting all federal and state mandates, including Individual Disability Education Act. Meets all funding requirements for contractual obligations, including transportation contracts, leases with technology, and of course our union agreements, our collective bargaining agreements. Provides funding to meet all requirements of Board of Education policies and practices, and reflects continuing cost containment efforts, including participation in the Regional Efficiencies Group. So there's a lot there. It's a lot to digest, but it also is reflective of what we've done over the last couple of years in terms of assumptions. Similarly, we've had some adjustments in what I'm putting forward as a proposal to the board in terms of our priorities as we start to think and hone our budget development for 19-20. You'll see in here the reoccurrence of things that we tried to get through in the budget last year, and we bring those back, and then other areas where we need to move forward. We start with curriculum assessment and instruction. That's our core work, as we talked about with the walkthroughs and so forth, and what goes on in the classroom is most important. We talk about leadership, and then we have another section on our operations and facilities. So in terms of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, we want to make sure, we've talked about this over the years, this has been an area of trying to get some real strong resources behind, is establishing classroom libraries, K through 8, that are aligned to the standards in the integration of the curriculum we are designing. Number 2, we, from last year, wanted to implement a World Language Lab at the middle school. That would be a mobile lab, and we weren't able to do that, so we pushed that forward. Number 3, continue to support our faculty capacity development aligned to student assessments and teacher evaluation data. And there's a lot of professional development that goes into that, and we want to invest in that. Number 4, offer, this is something Dr. Ruby and I have been waiting to start the planning for over the last couple of years, and we want to make sure we offer a regular education summer school program to improve outcomes for our struggling learners, K through 3, and we would propose, and we'll develop a plan to share with you down the road, that we want to really focus on reading in the first summer that we do that. We currently have extended school year for our students with that qualify with special needs, but we don't have a regular ed opportunity for our struggling learners. We do have a pay-as-you-go summer school for high school students with credit recovery and so forth, and that's something we do through the RESC Ed Advance, but we don't have an actual regular ed summer school for our struggling learners. Also, number 5, continue to develop assessment literacy of our professional staff. As you know, we've put the assessment system in place. Our staff is really becoming more and more versed in that and utilizing that data more and more to plan their instruction. We still need work in that area. There's a lot to learn there. You can never stop learning in that area. Continue to support our curriculum development to the standards aligned work. Many of you were present to actually meet Dr. Alcock when she did her presentation in the keynote at the beginning of the year. We have formally trained teachers, and our principals are also involved in that work, and our other administrators. Number 8, analyze outcomes of standards-based grading to develop standards-based reporting with support of intensive professional learning. So as Dr. Ruby has reiterated many times, people like to jump to standards-based report cards, but you can't have any of that unless you have standards-aligned curriculum, standards-aligned instruction, standards-aligned assessment, standards-aligned grading, and then standards-aligned reporting. You have to do that in sequence, and we're developing that. So we want to continue toward that. Number 9, research and identify inclusive process for curricular tools to support our curriculum at the high school, specifically in science, and in K-12 social studies. I know there was some science work at Kate just last night that we'll bring forward at the next meeting. Offer an additional language at Brookfield High School. Develop in-house analytics for our data warehouse. Fully implement Rubicon Atlas, which houses our curriculum work. implement integrated enrichment model. We have the consultant that's given us some help here at the beginning of the year, and we want to implement, I talked about this at the last meeting, an integrated enrichment model, and also update our tag identification process, and we'd like to start that. We're going to develop a plan. I will be asking for resources to support this going forward in the budget, and develop a plan starting small, likely in the 3rd, 4th grade area next year, and then of course building the program year after year. And of course, bringing in a consultant to help us examine school start times. So under all of the instructional areas, the 14 big areas, and I will certainly align a proposed budget for you in early December. Under leadership, we want to continue to invest in developing our administrative leadership capacity through the training we're doing to analyze instruction and provide targeted feedback for our teachers. Again, we've worked on that for 3 years. We're continuing that this year, and it's an area we still need to work on. And again, one of those areas you never can be perfect at. And how do we supervise? How do we evaluate? As a matter of fact, we're spending the day, many of us are spending the day on Friday in some training on working on that. And then finally, under operations and facilities, we want to support the municipal building committee, as we talked about at a great deal tonight, to evaluate, analyze, and plan for facility reorganization. And that obviously has to do with the new building project. We want to collaborate with the CAPE subcommittee and our educational leaders to identify space configuration to support creativity and innovation. Again, this goes with the evolution of the development of the new school project. Again, conceptual design was, the final conceptual design was presented last night. We're a long way away from ed specs, but there's a lot we can do to build excitement and a real solid program going forward. Number 3, implement safety and security plan of the school district, and this would be inclusive of the recommendations of our security task force that we started last spring. A number of you are on that task force, and we also have some community members. As a matter of fact, we're meeting tomorrow morning. We've really identified some trends and themes, and that the committee will have some recommendations moving forward that may include resource investment. We want to continue with our technology in terms of increasing our wireless capacity for the district. Continue to upgrade the presentation and presentation stations and our digital integration for technology, and then finally advocate and plan for the upgrade of athletic facilities, athletic fields, and our facilities. So there's a lot there. I talked a lot. If anybody has any questions, thoughts, other things, this is a proposal from me, and we certainly can make adjustments this evening and as we go. And
There's a lot there.
It's a lot to do, and it's just a smooth continuation of what we've been working on.
I can't wait.
Exciting times in Brookfield. Always exciting times.
So as we get going on this big project around the facilities, should we have a dedicated project leader on our team who's focusing in on all of these requirement documents and all the needs that kind of keeps us well coordinated? Or is that part of the project plan and the soft cost, or how do we staff it up?
I'm not sure how to specifically answer that, but maybe you can ask that differently.
Well, let me give it as an example.
Okay.
So when the town, let me get closer to this so people can hear. When the town embarked on the streetscape for Four Corners, which is beautiful, by the way, and there's a lot of new building, and they have to have a project plan that had submissions for grants. It had a lot of requirement documents and stuff. They hired a person full-time, named Greg Dombowski, who ran that project, managed it as a project, dealt with all the requirements, dealt with all the possible interfaces, and kept it moving. Do we need someone on our staff that is going to coordinate all the forms you're going to need to do, all the submissions to the state Department of Education people, all the things that happen? Does the NBC do that?
So
How
here's
does that
what we've
get
got.
staffed?
So you've got I think there's 2 layers to that question that I think I should I don't know if the 2 layers will answer one of them will definitely answer your question. So the first part of that is the architect that actually is hired. See, the Tech-Done Architects is helping us develop this initial concept. But there will be a bid process for, once this is moved forward from referendum, if that all goes well and we pass referendum, a bid process will have to happen where we hire an architect to actually design the building with all of the ed specs. They will do all of the shepherding of the project through the state grant process and the like and the design. Then, one of the things we talked about, and it was a learning from the high school project 10 years ago, is that we need to, as a town, and I imagine would have to come from the NBC, Bob, to hire, and it's my term, I don't know if this is the exact term we use, but a general contractor that has the interest of the town in mind in
Owner
terms of
project manager.
Project manager who
But it's-
interfaces with the general
But it's an
contractor.
owner
Who
project
interfaces.
manager,
Go
and
ahead,
it is
Colette.
built into the soft costs.
It is in the soft
Yes.
costs?
It is built into the 18.25% soft
Exactly.
costs.
Are there things, I've never done a school building project, but I kept hearing terms like the educational standards and the need that, the teaching needs that go into the project. It feels to me like it would be a lot of work for either our school principal, I'm looking at her, or looking at them, I should say, since there's two of them here, or our educational staff who are thinking about what is it I want to do with that open space. I mean, I was thinking about this when we were talking about the fishbowl. You probably remember that conversation last night. It's great to have an inside open space, but what do we really want it to feel like and look like? Do we, so that the educators are feeling like it's a very useful and productive space. And I'm not sure I want an architect making that decision. So who's on our staff who makes those decisions?
Yeah. So thanks, Maureen. So that is us, as well as working with the architect in terms of the physical design. But it's us looking at what are we trying to accomplish with our strategic plan. I've had a number of teachers who have already volunteered themselves to be a part of that. I don't want people to forget that 2 years ago when we initiated the project, and I know there was a bit of a hiatus, we had teachers in talking about these kinds of spaces, these more contemporary spaces, and how we could best utilize them and what they saw. One of the things that's interesting, just as an aside, teachers talked about was natural lighting and acoustics. They talked about it, and Dean and I can speak to this. I know we're getting a little older, Dean, but there were times when the heater was on, the ventilation unit was on, and a student was talking and a teacher was talking. Depending on what corner of the room you're in, you can't hear what's going on. And so acoustic design is very important. But the other piece is Dr. Alcock, Marie Alcock, who's doing our curriculum design work with us. Not only are we building in the integrated enrichment into that, but we're also looking at, she's all over the world, and she's actually recommended some literature for me as well, and Dr. Ruby and I are looking at educational spaces, contemporary spaces. The administrative team is reading a book called Bold Moves that I will be sharing with the Board of Education as well, and in there is a whole chapter on the physical space and environment.
She actually does.
Go ahead, jump in, Marie.
She actually, Dr. Alcock actually does work in concert with architects, school architects, folks that just build schools all over the world. And in some of the presentations that we've all been to, she slips these really enticing slides of some of these amazing schools that have been built that she's consulted on. And we did have a brief conversation with her in the spring about engaging her in thinking through some of these spaces with us, so that the design of educational space aligns with the curriculum that we're developing.
Okay. So my question was actually, I think that's great, by the way. I think
There's
we
a
have
lot
to
of-
do
maybe
that. There's
3 or
a
4
lot
layers to that
of, a
question.
lot of input that go into the designing the space we want. My question is much more into this point on that. Is there the detailed sets of things that need to go on in our space that need staffing? That's really my question. And I'm not gathering we have an answer to that right now, but I would ask the architect, how many forms are you going to be asking me to fill out and sign off on? How many, what's our role in going to the state versus your role in going to the state? I mean, I don't trust, I hate to use the word trust, but I don't trust that the architect's going to carry everything on their own back without getting stuff from us. And I don't want it to sink our teachers or our administrators simply because we didn't think it through.
Okay.
That's my question then. So I'm just worried about the level of detail that goes into a building project. It can be extraordinary, and we haven't done one of those.
And I can just say that I think that's great thinking, because having worked in, I'm sure we've all done this in our personal lives, when you are having something done on your own property, not that to the scale of $1 million, millions and millions of dollars for a school building. But when you talk to contractors, you do ask them those questions, like, who's going to the town hall and getting all these things, who's filling out all the state papers when you're going into wetlands and things like that. And what I found in my experience is, and I went with the guy that was going to do everything for me and had a punch list and had references to do that. So I think it varies with the contractor, the general contractor that you're working with, so we have to ask those questions.
Well, there's an architectural phase and there's a
Yeah,
contractor
right.
phase, and they're both going to be important. I remember just as a story, there was a point in time on the high school edition where there was an extraordinary amount of coordination that needed to go on between the guy working on the wells, the pumps, the control station, and it was interesting to me because it was a coordination issue. But what was also interesting to me is, well, what do you want? Was a common question. And so Dan would be the sort of person who would really understand how to get in there and understand that. But there's going to be 150 of those questions, right? Do you want this kind of whiteboard? Do you want that kind of
All day
whiteboard?
long.
Do you want, where do you want the plugs for the presentation station? Do you need the switches working in the following way? That's a zillion things that go on. And your example of doing it in your own house is perfect, as they come to you with your punch list of all the questions they want to ask us.
I remember once somebody come into the back door because they were digging and they hit ledge, and I heard it. And the guy knocks on the door and he goes, "Oh, lady, you got a problem out here." I said, "No, the guy over there with the green hat, he's got the problem." Because he was in charge of all of it. You don't want them asking you all the questions.
That's correct. Okay.
One thought I had, just building off of kind of what you said, Bob, is one thing we have to keep in mind for the budget. Maybe not next year or the year after, but if we're going to spend all of this money on a fabulous new school with fabulous new spaces, we got to make sure we're continuing investing in professional learning that helps teachers and supports them on how do you teach within that. I think it would be a huge waste of resources if we don't, that is not hand in hand with the new building. So we have to
That's why
remember
working
that.
with Dr. Alcock on the curriculum design, the timing couldn't be better in that regard.
Yeah, the building isn't going to teach the kids,
Right.
no matter how great it
And,
is.
and that's,
Sorry.
that's the one thing, Colette and I have had that conversation. No matter how wonderful and new the building is, it's not going to magically make students higher achievers, and it's not going to magically make teachers the greatest show on earth. And it's constant professional learning, absolutely.
That's
The
hard
new
work
building is
for us.
not a panacea for that, and we want to make sure that's clear.
And thanks
Yes.
for saying that, Jen, because, when the budget comes out and people look at professional development again, yeah, it's always going to be there if you want to continue to have a robust learning experience for children. It's not something like, how many more years of this PD are we going to have?
Always.
That's forever. Sorry.
No, it should be.
No, yeah.
Well, I don't think you're having any disagreement here.
None.
By the way, it's same in other disciplines too.
Oh, it has to be.
The police department used to always have the training program that they needed to have,
Of
so
course.
we have and had to be there every year, same kind of concept.
And Bob, to your point, just onto your remark, but not exactly addressing your point, we are fortunate that on the MBC we do have school architects, and one of them was a former board member. So we do have someone that's straddling some of those.
And lived through the high school project.
Yes, and so they are have straddling those many different skills that are required.
Okay.
I'm just looking through the curriculum assessment and instruction list, and many of these things are initiatives that we wanted to get in this budget season and didn't get, and the one thing I see that I'm thinking maybe we might want to add is a specific objective to support our ELL learners. If you look at the enrollment report, those numbers are steadily climbing, and I think instead of, again, at budget time, saying, well, do we hire another teacher? Do we hire 2 paras? Do we hire 2 teachers? How do we manage and support this population? I think it would be helpful to see that as
Okay.
a specific objective.
I thank you for that, Deb. And, in the assumptions on the other page, we do reference changing dynamics based on enrollment and that kind of thing, so that gets at that. But specifically, we could put a piece there on that. I really welcome that. And as well, while it wasn't here as a specific objective, based on the assumptions, based on Dr. Sipala's report tonight, we already told you, one of the things we'll be asking for is a new pre-K teacher. So, I mean, that's something we could specifically put there. So, while these are kind of general goals, the budget proposal would have those specific resources, so I'm open to however the board might like me to finalize this so it can be accepted as is and, with modification, or brought back for November 7th to have a final, another draft of this for the final green light.
If we have time to have another draft, it'd be great.
Okay.
To add those additions.
Does it change anything on what you're doing?
No, it's exactly,
You're-
we communicate.
I know you're already underway on your budget.
And we
so-
communicate, honestly, I always thank our forefathers, whoever came up with the subcommittee system, because the reality is we, as teams from each subcommittee, working, whether it's CAPE or policy or communications or finance or facilities, we're all talking to each other all the time. So really, none of this is a surprise. And so, obviously, welcome the feedback, but these are the things we're thinking about. Pre-K,
Summer
enrichment, summer school. There is a health requirement coming down the pipe, may require some resources. Mr. Belanda and Mr. Baldwin, our PE health coordinator and athletic director, are working on that. Well, language, I mean, there's some areas where we're going to have to invest if we want to fulfill our goals. And certainly resources to train teachers and materials for our ELL students and perhaps an additional tutor or something like that. Things we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I agree that I think there should be something, at least just so that it's in writing, that we have something. I know we're going to continue to support our special education population, and we may need to add things to that, but I think if it's actually listed as one of
Okay.
our priorities along with that, it's sort of, you can even just, figure out in one bullet point something about special populations or something like that. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much. Great feedback.
So was one of the speakers at last night's meeting talked about universal pre-K?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything going on in terms of assessing whether Brookfield should start down that path or not?
I'm going to ask Dr. Ruby to step in a little bit on this one. But
Oh, she's so happy about that.
Well, but before that, I'd like to start by saying, it's really important to understand, just like a new building is not a panacea for higher student achievement or kinder people inside the building. Okay, that comes from training and love and dedication. A preschool program, universal for 4-year-olds, for example, there are many things to think about. It has to be a true long-term investment, and it has to be a vision that has years in the making and years in the planning. It isn't something you could just quickly do. Just like, frankly, it's more complicated, but like school start times, we'll just change the times. It's not that simple. Number one, there's the pragmatics and all of the things that go into our community and where we're at. The other piece is it takes resources. Preschool teachers are not non-certified people that maybe work at a daycare and we could just have them with the students for the day. That's not a true pre-K program. A pre-K program has certified teachers in the state of Connecticut that are part of our regular teaching faculty, and the resources have to be there for them. It also, there's a lot, Mark talked a great deal about NEASC accreditation. It's a great deal of accreditation and a long bureaucratic process that goes into developing a pre-K program. So those are some things people need to understand, the complications and the complexities and long-term vision we're going to need if we think that's where this district can go. The other caveat I'd put in there, speaking realistically and from learned experience, we don't get everything we ask for in the budget. it's hard to fund some of the have-tos that we have going on here, and we're always asked to take away to get other things in the budget. So we could want and want and want, and even if it's a real need, many times it's not funded, and we have to think about the context in which we live as well, and what do we have to do and what's already in line, and then what do we think we really would like to do and it would be really good for us, and move forward on that. So those are things we would, it takes a lot of planning. A preschool program, you'll see jumps in achievement right off the bat many times when you bring in your 4-year-olds, but you have to have continuous professional development. You have to have tremendously high qualified people to have a program like that. I think I probably said a lot of what Dr. Ruby was going to say. I apologize,
We talked
Maureen.
about it, because we
We've
talked
been
about
talking.
it this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's on everybody's mind. So I'll let you add on. Thank you, Maureen.
So having experience with preschools, I had a $4 million federal grant when I was in higher ed, where I spent 3 years doing preschool work, and it's very complicated. Some of the things that John and I had talked about was, the certified teachers. A lot of the preschools in our area are NIAC certified, which we would want to be. That's something that takes years. It's like the process that the high school's going through. And the curriculum for preschool is quite involved. So I am a proponent of universal preschool, but I also know from working in preschool that it's something that takes, as John said, years of planning. And then there's the impact that it has on the community. And so you have to play nice in the sandbox with the people in the community who have businesses that are running preschools, and talk to the community about what's the tolerance for and the need for a preschool, because preschool is typically half a day, and a lot of preschools that have a daycare attached with it, people can bring their children at 6 in the morning and pick them up at 6 at night if that's what their need is. That's not the same in a public school preschool program. They're there for half a day, and then those kids have to go someplace else. So you have to do a lot of coordination, not only about the educational piece, but with fitting into the community and the other community services. So I think that it's a lot to bite off at once. It's something that really, if there's an appetite for that, we need to start talking about it. We need to plan for it long range in a building. But it's going to take really years. It's not like we decide we want to do it and we just open up a preschool.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good thoughts.
If the state had said, like New York City said, they're going to have universal pre-K. So if Connecticut said we're going to have universal pre-K,
they'd have to give us a timeline.
Yeah.
The timeline.
And then there would be state funding associated with it, I'd hope. Is that
We always
being
hope.
hopeful?
It's not a strategy.
We always say hope is not a strategy.
Yeah. But I mean, amazingly, in New York City, they said it and then did it a year later, and I know the results are very uneven.
Tennessee did the same thing.
Yeah.
So
And it seemed like it was very chaotic.
yeah.
And they maybe relax some regulations as well to make that happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so an article that I sent to John last night, because I happen to have it on my phone because I've been reading it a couple weeks ago, was about the effects of preschool on later academic outcomes. And just like anything, I mean, this is not, you don't have to be, a rocket scientist to figure this out. It all has to do with quality. And so the article, and I'll be happy to send it to whoever wants to read it, is looking at when Tennessee went wholesale on pre-K, and really didn't work very well because of the quality of the programming that they did. And I think the other state that they were comparing was Maryland. When they did it in a much different way. And so you'll see that children who go to what you'd call a high quality preschool that's, NIAC accredited and the curriculum is in line with the state standards, those children do have increased academic success. But after about second or third grade, usually second grade, it all evens out. The kids that went to preschool, these really good preschools, and the kids that did not, there's a flattening. And there are a lot of hypotheses about why that happens. If you have to differentiate for all these children that are in your class, and I think the people who teach younger grades can attest to this. It's not malicious or intentional, but if I've got this child who didn't have a good preschool experience and is really needy, and this child over here who went to, Yale preschool and she's like ahead, I have to spend more time with him and giving her things, other things to do, and then after a while I catch him up and it's an even playing field. So you have to provide a lot of professional development to those early learning teachers so that they can differentiate for this child who's ahead and this child who needs more help, so that they continue to grow at their own pace, and that we're not coming to that leveling out, because a lot of the studies show that that's what happens. So not only doing the PD and the planning for the preschool, but there's a lot of professional learning that has to be provided to the kindergarten, first and second grade teachers when everybody has that preschool experience that's in your town. And then there's those couple of kids that didn't have that because their parents it's not mandatory, chose not to send them there.
Do we know roughly what percentage of our kindergartners have been to preschool?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know the number offhand for this year, but we absolutely know that because that's data that we take. I don't know if.
I mean, is it like a high percentage? I would assume, but.
It's much higher than in towns that aren't like Brookfield.
Yeah. Like 80%, would you guess?
I don't want to guess because
Okay.
I don't know. Mary Rose, do you know what for this year? Have you looked at the percentage for of students who had preschool?
Experience that are kindergartners now?
Yeah, we have that information.
Be interesting to see. Then
We
we
would
would
be
start to
able to-
identify the need too,
Mhm.
in terms of who's not going to preschool and then why.
Mhm.
That is,
And, you know,
that'd be good
I
information.
would
to
say
have actually.
ideally, that if we could just wave a magic wand and have the ideal, it would be awesome to have preschool available to everybody that lived in Brookfield and have them all in our really excellent program. But there's a lot of work to get there. And don't forget, we do need to be sensitive to do that, to the community impact
Yep.
on other people's businesses.
Okay.
And one last thing, because I'm working now with the preschools in town, a lot of them are religious. They're affiliated with churches. And so that might be a choice that parents are making for their children in that particular stage of development, that they want them at this school or this school or this school because they have an affiliation with that school, or they just have a belief, and we have to we have to be knowledgeable about that and respect that.
Okay, thank you. Great input.
Any other questions, discussions in regards? So if we could make those changes,
I'll
then
make
we
those
can approve it
changes and then
afterwards.
we'll have this ready to go.
That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 3 main points. And seeing as we exactly had 3 different items on our old and new business.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, presentation would be one.
Which,
project.
oh, this,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
presentation?
Yeah, the new school, and then just maybe that would give us an opportunity to direct to the Facebook page and the email
Yeah.
address.
Enrollment report.
Enrollment report, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree.
And the budget goals?
Yeah, the budget priorities.
Everyone in agreement there?
Sounds good.
All right,
Agreed.
That was easy.
that was easy.
Great when there's only 3
Yeah, exactly. Upcoming events. So we have 2 items that we have to worry about.
So there will be no school for students on Tuesday, November 6th, professional development for teachers. At Center Elementary School, the PTO Fall Social is tomorrow, October 18th, from 5:30 to 7:30. Evening conferences are on Monday, October 29th, and Thursday, November 1st, from 5 to 8. Afternoon conferences are on Friday, November 2nd, from 1 to 3. At Huckleberry, fall conferences are on Monday, October 29th, Thursday, November 1st, and Friday, November 2nd. All 3 days, students are dismissed at 12:15. There's a PTO meeting on Friday, November 2nd, from 9:30 to 10:30. At the middle school, the annual walkathon is tomorrow, Thursday, October 18th, from 1 to 2:30. The PSAT for 8th graders is on Tuesday, October 23rd, from 8 to 10. Team Links 6th grade field trip to the Connecticut Science Center is on Wednesday, October 24th. And the Team Bearcats 6th grade field trip to the Connecticut Science Center is on Thursday, October 25th. The parent assessment meeting is on Thursday, October 25th, from 9 to 10. The book fair is the week of October 29th. Red Ribbon Week is also the week of October 29th. And there's a 5th grade field trip to the Ridgefield Playhouse on Thursday, November 1st, from 9 to 11:30. At the high school, there's a freshman forum on Tuesday, October 23rd, from 6:30 to 9 in the auditorium. The instrumental band show is on Friday, October 26th, Saturday, October 27th, and Sunday, October 28th, from 5 to 10, with a 7 o'clock start in the auditorium. And auditions for the spring musical are on Monday, October 29th, and Tuesday, October 30th, from 2 to 5. That's
A
it.
lot of events happening. Thank you.
It is.
All right. Now we have executive session.
Recommended motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing a lawsuit filed by former Superintendent Anthony Bavona and confidential student matter.
Second.
You can give it a Jen.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this concludes the public session of our meeting. Thank you all very much for attending. Have a great evening.
I think we